I want you to picture the underside of a massive highway interchange somewhere in your city. Just, close your eyes for a second and try to visualize it.
Oh, it's usually pretty bleak.
Right. It's probably incredibly loud. The air is, well, it's dusty, thick with exhaust. You're basically just looking at these endless expanses of gray concrete, chain link fences, and probably a lot of pigeon droppings.
Yeah.
It is entirely devoid of life, like it's a place you just hurry past, keeping your head down. But what if that specific, unloved, seemingly dead patch of concrete is actually the most valuable, untapped real estate for community life in your entire city?
I mean, it's the ultimate anti-destination, right? We spent, well, the better part of a century engineering these spaces to be completely ignored. They are just the leftovers of urban expansion.
Exactly. And today, we're exploring a movement that is completely flipping the script on those 20th century highway scars. We're taking a deep dive into this really fascinating concept called shadow urbanism, or as it's known in the pioneering city of Montreal, Urbanism de l'ombre.
Yeah, that's right.
So we've pulled together this in-depth report, and it's sourced from wikiresidence.ca and infodrone.ca. And we're going to look at how modern cities are taking these dead zones beneath their massive infrastructure and transforming them into, like, thriving, weatherproof hubs of life, sport, and just general urban resilience.
It's honestly a fundamental rethinking of city planning. And I think it is crucial to understand right from the start that this isn't just about, throwing down a few picnic benches or putting a ping pong table under a bridge.
Right, it's way bigger than that.
Exactly. We are looking at a highly coordinated, multi-million-dollar strategy of territorial requalification. Because for decades, these highly mineralized highways basically functioned as physical walls.
Whoa, okay, stop right there. I'm going to pause you because you just dropped like two really heavy urban planning terms right out of the gate.
Oh, did I? My bad.
Yeah, you said territorial requalification and highly mineralized. Can we translate those so we're all on the same page here?
Fair enough, yeah. So mineralized just means a space completely covered in hard, non-living surfaces. Asphalt, concrete, steel. There's no soil, no grass, basically no ability to absorb water or cool the air.
Okay, got it.
And territorial requalification, that's the process of taking a zone that has a single, often negative purpose, like a really noisy corridor for cars, and deliberately re-engineering it to serve multiple positive civic functions, like recreation, water management, and community gathering.
Okay, let's unpack this. So you're taking a dead concrete zone and basically forcing it to work for the people living around it.
Precisely. Because these highways, historically, they acted as physical walls, isolating communities. Shadow urbanism is this deliberate architectural process of stitching those divided neighborhoods back together using the very structures that, well, tore them apart in the first place.
That's incredible. And to really understand how this works in practice, we need to look at ground zero for this movement.
Yeah.
Based on the sources we have, that is the Gadbois hub in Montreal.
Yeah, the Gadbois project is massive.
Yeah, it really is. It sits right beneath Highway 15. What kind of scale are we actually talking about here? Because looking at the sheer ambition of this thing, I mean, it can't be cheap.
Oh, it is a staggering financial commitment. We are talking about a joint investment from the City of Montreal and the provincial government that exceeds $85 million.
Wait, $85 million just to fix up the area around an overpass?
Well, it's broken down into two main components, actually. About $64.7 million of that is dedicated to a massive indoor center renovation.
Okay, that makes a bit more sense.
Yeah, they are completely upgrading about 5,800 square meters of existing recreation space and then adding another 1,700 square meters on top of that. But the part that really embodies the whole shadow urbanism concept is the $23 million outdoor hub that sits directly beneath the highway itself.
Which brings up a really fascinating point in the report about the timeline for that outdoor hub. Yeah. It says the intensive work starts in April 2026 and it's targeted for completion in December 2027. But there is a heavily enforced mandatory winter break right in the middle from December 2026 to April 2027. Why do they have to stop entirely for 4 whole months?
It all comes down to chemistry, believe it or not. The centerpiece of this outdoor hub is a professional-grade skate park. And when you are pouring concrete for a high-performance skating surface, the curing process is incredibly delicate.
Because it has to be perfectly smooth.
Yeah, but also, concrete doesn't just dry like paint. It undergoes a chemical reaction that generates heat. If you pour it in the middle of a freezing Canadian winter, the water inside the mixture can actually freeze before the crystalline structure fully forms.
Oh, meaning the concrete becomes brittle.
Exactly. It will crack, it will flake, and the surface won't be nearly smooth enough for professional skate wheels, which, require near perfect friction. So the climate literally dictates the construction schedule just to protect the structural integrity of the pour.
That is wild. It reminds me a bit of a forest ecosystem.
Has
Like, before you can have this beautiful canopy of trees above ground, you have to establish this massive, invisible mycelial network of fungi underground to support it all. And it seems like that's exactly what the engineers are doing beneath Highway 15.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Yeah, they aren't just paving skate parks, they're spending millions on the underground network first.
Absolutely. The underground work is arguably the most critical phase. They are completely excavating the area to replace and construct entirely new sewer systems and drinking water pipes.
Which makes sense, right?
Yeah,
Because you have to support the future densification of the neighborhood.
you really do.
You can't invite thousands of people to a new hub without the plumbing to handle it. You build that invisible root system of the city first. And then, only once that underground work is done, do they build the surface level stuff.
Yeah, the professional skate park, the basketball courts, the ball hockey rinks.
Right. But this brings us to the core contradiction of the entire project. Like, the giant elephant in the room.
The location itself.
Yes. We are talking about spending $85 million to build a gorgeous professional-grade community park directly beneath the Turcotte interchange. For anyone listening who doesn't know, this is one of the busiest, loudest, most heavily trafficked pieces of infrastructure in North America.
It's massive.
So why on earth would you build a park exactly where the noise, the shadows, and the exhaust are at their absolute highest? It just feels totally counterintuitive.
It does seem backwards at first glance, I'll give you that. But what's fascinating here is that urban planners are not trying to ignore those negative traits. They are actually utilizing them.
Wait, utilizing them? How?
They are taking the highway's biggest drawbacks and turning them into functional assets. Let's start with the most obvious one, which is the shadow. The massive concrete overpass acts as an indestructible natural roof.
Oh, right. Like a giant weather shield.
Exactly. It provides complete weather immunity. You can skateboard, play basketball, or, run fitness drills in a torrential downpour. You are entirely protected from the rain, the snow, and the intense direct heat of the summer sun.
That's actually pretty brilliant.
And the data we have from the sources shows the tangible impact of this. The protection from the elements actually boosts annual park attendance by 20 to 30% compared to traditional open-air parks.
Think about that.
Yeah.
You get a 30% increase in community usage just because you built it under a bridge. But I still can't get past the noise.
The traffic noise.
Yeah, I mean, you're trying to play basketball or skateboard under a roaring highway. How is that pleasant for anyone?
This is where we get into the acoustics of urban design and a concept called nuisance cancellation. Think about the sounds of urban sports. Skateboarding is incredibly loud and sharp.
Oh, for sure. The clacking sound.
Yeah, you have hard urethane wheels smacking against concrete, the screech of grinding on metal rails. Ball hockey involves whistles, shouting, sticks slapping the pavement. If you drop a skate park into the middle of a quiet residential zone, you are guaranteed to get noise complaints from the neighbors.
Oh, absolutely. The neighbors would be at the city council meetings instantly.
Right. It is a very sharp, percussive sound profile. But by placing these specific, noisy activities directly under the highway, you create an acoustic masking effect.
Okay, I see where this is going.
The ambient, continuous, low-frequency drone of the highway traffic completely absorbs and masks the sharp, high-frequency sounds of the sports. The highway's noise pollution essentially swallows the community's noise. It solves the residential conflict before it even begins.
Okay, using the roar of the highway as white noise to hide the skate park is genuinely brilliant. But I have to push back here a little bit.
Sure, go ahead.
Acoustic masking is great for the neighbors, obviously. But what about the kids actually playing under there? If you are hanging out under a dark concrete highway with literally thousands of combustion engines passing overhead, what about the actual physical pollution?
It's a valid concern.
And what about the heat radiating off millions of tons of concrete? Aren't we just building a sort of dystopian playground where teenagers are breathing in concentrated exhaust fumes?
It's a critical question, and it's the exact reason why modern shadow urbanism cannot just be pouring more concrete on top of existing concrete. If you look at the Gadbois master plan, a massive portion of the strategy is dedicated to biological countermeasures.
Biological countermeasures,
Hmm.
like plants.
Yeah, they refer to it in the report as massive greening. And this isn't just planting a few decorative flower beds. They are installing robust, scientifically selected trees and shrubs specifically designed to disrupt the mineral environment.
Explain how that works, though. How does a tree fight a highway?
First, you have to address the urban heat island effect. The Turco interchange is a massive thermal mass. All that gray concrete absorbs the sun's radiation all day and traps it, radiating it back out and making the surrounding air significantly hotter.
Right, it feels like an oven.
Exactly. The massive greening acts as a biological cooling system through shade and a process called transpiration, where plants release water vapor into the air.
So it literally lowers the ambient temperature of the site.
Yes, exactly. Furthermore, the specific plant species chosen act as living air purifiers. Their leaves are textured to physically trap heavy particulate matter, specifically the PM 2.5 pollution generated by pyres and exhaust.
Oh, wow. So they catch the smog.
Yeah, they pull pollutants out of the air before they reach the ground level where people are breathing. It softens the space visually, thermally, and chemically.
And when you look at the underlying economics of it, it's just incredibly clever because, as the report points out, the land directly beneath the highway overpass has absolutely zero market value.
Zero. You can't do anything with it.
Exactly. You cannot legally build a high-rise apartment there. You can't build a commercial shopping mall. The land is legally unbuildable. So shadow urbanism takes this zero-value land and gives it immense use value for the community.
It manufactures a civic asset basically out of thin air.
But the report also makes it clear that a project like Gadbois, as massive and expensive as it is, it didn't just happen overnight. This is the culmination of years of testing. The sources mention a term, tactical urbanism. Can you break down what that means in this context?
Yeah, so tactical urbanism is essentially the beta testing of city planning. Instead of immediately spending $85 million, a city will authorize low-cost, temporary, or, community-led interventions to see how people actually use a space.
Sort of like a pop-up.
Exactly. If the temporary pop-up works, it proves the concept and justifies the larger permanent investment later. And Gadbois actually has a big brother that proved this model could work.
Here's where it gets really interesting. You're talking about the Van Horn Overpass,
Yeah.
also known as the Champ des Possibles.
Yes. The report describes what the space under the Van Horn overpass used to be like. It was this dusty, dark, neglected zone that felt genuinely insecure. It was a place you actively avoided walking through at night.
But then they applied this tactical approach, right? They transformed it into a street-style skate park, brought in specialized lighting to eliminate all those dark corners, and invited artists to paint monumental murals on the massive concrete support pillars.
Mm-hmm. And it completely shifted the gravity of the entire neighborhood. It became this massive youth hub.
It really proved that a space defined by visual and auditory nuisance could become a premier cultural destination. But there were other historical proofs of concept mentioned in the sources too. Place de la Paix, for example.
Right, which was basically just parking lot.
Yeah, just a highly mineralized parking lot, a space for rapid transit completely unloved. But with the city's approval, it was turned into a dedicated zone for skateboarding and outdoor film screenings. And then there's Project 45 at Latiai, which I find really compelling because it was an entirely DIY-like do-it-yourself movement.
Project 45 perfectly demonstrated the core thesis. It was built by the community itself on marginal industrial land right on the edge of the highway. It proved organically that noisy, highway-adjacent zones are the ideal playground for urban sports that would otherwise disturb quiet residential streets.
So we have these beta tests, Place de la Paix, Project 45, Van Horn. They all proved the theory works. People will actually hang out under a highway if you make it safe and functional.
Yeah.
But now, with Gadbois, the scale of the money has totally changed.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the socioeconomic implications are profound. We are now seeing sport health investments in these shadow zones that frequently exceed $50 million.
That's a lot of capital.
It is. And when a municipality injects that level of capital into a marginalized space, it completely changes the real estate calculus of the surrounding area. These investments drastically increase nearby property values.
Which sounds like a win on paper. The neighborhood gets nicer, the property values go up, but isn't the obvious danger there accelerated gentrification?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, if you build this amazing $85 million hub for the local youth, but then the property values skyrocket and those families' rents double, You've just displaced the very people the park was built to serve. You've improved the concrete, but you've essentially evicted the community.
That is the paradox of urban renewal, right? And it's a trap cities have fallen into for decades. But the sources highlight a modern trend designed to specifically combat this. The current strategy in shadow urbanism is to anchor these massive leisure hubs directly to affordable social housing.
Meaning you bake housing protection into the infrastructure plan itself.
Exactly. You pair the civic investment with residential protection, ensuring that the current residents can actually afford to stay and enjoy the newly revitalized territory. The park and the protected housing have to be developed in tandem.
That is so crucial. Okay, so if we know we can successfully turn specific overpasses and old parking lots into community hubs, the natural next question is, what happens when we apply this exact same logic to the largest, most disruptive, most massive infrastructure in the entire city?
Yeah, that's when you transition from creating isolated neighborhood hubs to overhauling the city's entire circulatory system.
And the report points to the Della Park project, which is right next door to Gadbois. Instead of just building under the highway, the Della Park is a massive green bridge, literally a park suspended in the air.
It's an amazing concept.
Yeah, its entire purpose is to physically go over the rail lines and highways to de-isolate several disconnected neighborhoods. It's using the immense scale of highway engineering to build a pedestrian superhighway.
And the ultimate candidate for this large-scale understructure urbanism is Highway 40, also known as the Metropolitan. It is a massive elevated structure that cuts right across the city, casting a massive shadow.
The biggest shadow of all.
Literally.
Yeah.
And between 2025 and 2027, Highway 40 is undergoing major structural repairs. They are fixing the concrete, updating the drainage, and the sources reveal several incredible architectural proposals aimed at taking advantage of that construction window to radically alter the space beneath the highway.
The ideas they have for Highway 40 are genuinely mind-blowing. Let's break down the mechanics of these proposals because they honestly sound like science fiction. First, there's the Metropolitan Corridor.
Right, so the Metropolitan proposal aims to completely eliminate the dusty parking lots and chain link fences that currently live under the elevated highway. Instead, architectural firms are proposing well-lit public spaces, zones for urban logistics, and even urban greenhouses.
Wait, hold on. How do you grow food in a greenhouse that is permanently in the shadow of a highway?
By heavily utilizing modern agricultural technology, you integrate high-efficiency LED grow lights, angled mirror systems to redirect ambient sunlight from the perimeter, and, this is the best part, you capture the ambient heat radiating from the highway structure itself to maintain the climate control inside the greenhouse.
Wow. You are literally growing food beneath a major transit artery.
Exactly.
That completely shatters the idea of what a highway is supposed to look like.
Oh.
And then there's the Cremasy HUD proposal. How does that one work?
The focus there is on pedestrian safety and psychological comfort. Currently, walking under the highway to get to local institutions can feel incredibly hostile to a pedestrian. It's dark, the sightlines are poor, and you just feel vulnerable.
Yeah, nobody likes walking under those things at night.
Exactly. So the goal is to dramatically improve the lighting design and create dedicated, widened pedestrian links that flow naturally under the megastructure. By improving visibility and removing physical barriers, you treat the highway as a welcoming gateway rather than an intimidating wall.
I love the focus on psychological safety there.
Yeah.
But this next one, sponge streets, is probably the most elegant engineering solution in the whole report.
Oh, the sponge street concept is fantastic. It addresses a very practical, very expensive urban hydrology problem. Viaducts and highway underpasses naturally flood during heavy rain.
Because they are basically massive concrete bowls, right? They're the lowest point in the local topography, and concrete obviously doesn't absorb water.
Precisely. The water has nowhere to go, so it pools, causing massive viaduct floods. The Sponge Street initiative isn't just about installing wider drain pipes, though. It involves thoroughly modernizing the landscape architecture around the massive concrete support columns.
So what are they actually doing to the columns?
They are replacing the impermeable asphalt around the columns with permeable pavers and deep-root bioswales. They plant specialized, highly absorbent vegetation in these beds.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, so when it rains, the water flows into these natural basins. The plants and the engineered soil drink up the excess stormwater, acting like a giant sponge. And as an added benefit, these specific plants are chosen for their ability to purify the air and filter out the heavy atmospheric pollutants generated by the cars above.
That is just. The highway causes the pollution and the unnatural water runoff, so use the highway's own structural footprint to house the biological cure. is brilliant.
It really is.
And finally, on the far east side of the city, there's the 40 Net Zero project. They're proposing a totally carbon-neutral business park where the highway comes back down to ground level. How do you make a highway business park carbon neutral?
By integrating sustainable infrastructure directly into the highway's buffer zones. It involves installing solar panels on sound-dampening walls, utilizing advanced carbon capture materials in the construction, and integrating dedicated bike paths and lineal parks directly bordering the highway.
Turning the negative into a positive again.
Exactly. It turns the traditional nuisance zone into active green infrastructure that offsets its own carbon footprint.
So what does this all mean? If we zoom all the way out here, it seems like we are witnessing a massive transition in urban theory. We are moving from an era where we just tried to ignore these massive concrete highways to an era where we are actively using them as urban armor. We are, like, hiding our communities under their shield.
This raises an important question, though. It requires a complete reevaluation of how we as a society define good real estate.
How so?
Well, for decades, the proximity of a highway was the ultimate real estate penalty. It drove values down because it meant noise, dirt, and danger. But shadow urbanism proves that high-quality, intelligent public infrastructure can invert that reality. By meticulously managing the acoustics, the hydrology, and the biology of the space beneath, the proximity to the highway transforms from a penalty into a highly attractive residential lever. The nuisance literally becomes the amenity.
It completely flips the board. And that brings us right back to you listening to this. We started by asking you to picture that dark, dusty, loud interchange in your city, the one you always hurry past, keeping your head down. Next time you walk under that overpass, I don't think you'll just see a dead traffic artery anymore. You'll look up at that massive concrete ceiling and you'll see the ultimate urban campus. You'll see a roof just waiting for a community. It is such an inspiring lesson in resilience, taking a city's biggest, ugliest scars and figuring out how to turn them into its beating heart.
But, as we look toward the future of these spaces, there is a really fascinating puzzle to consider. Everything we've discussed today, shadow urbanism relies entirely on the negative traits of 20th century highways.
Right.
It needs the deafening low-frequency noise of combustion engines to acoustically mask the skateboards. It needs the massive, wide concrete overpasses to block the rain. But what happens in 30 or 40 years? If a global shift toward autonomous, perfectly silent electric vehicles, combined with heavy investments in mass transit, makes the roar of the highway disappear, what then?
Wow, I hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah, when the noise is gone, do we still have the acoustic shield we need for these noisy shadow hubs? Or, if these massive highway megastructures eventually become totally obsolete, do the abandoned highways themselves become the next layer of elevated green spaces? We'll leave you to think about what the city of tomorrow might build on the ruins of today's traffic.